We're all made of stories. Big stories, small stories, interesting stories. The sporty A-class limousine I'm driving today comes from a company that is over 100 years old and is part of a story of relentless passion to create nothing but the best. Talking of stories, my guest today is an engaging storyteller and entrepreneur. As scriptwriter, she has worked on Yash Raj films and is known for her work in movies such as Manorama's 6 Feet Under, Ladies vs. Ricky Bal, Aisha, and most recently the OTT series 4 More Shots Please and Shekhar Lakho. A couple of years ago, driven by her passion for fine gin, she co-founded Adventurous Spirits, which makes the Tamras gin. And here she is, Devika Bhagat. So Devika, tell me, script writing, a lot of attention to detail in script writing because, you have to be aware of, I think, maybe the time, the era, the people, their personalities. Are you a car buff? Do you also notice details in cars?
Well, yes, I do. I'm actually, one of my passions in life is design, industrial design, product design, architectural design. So this is one of the things which I notice a lot in cars when I'm traveling, in terms of the details, the attention to detail that they've played in designing, the vehicle, because it's yes, most importantly about the engine, but also about the feel that the car gives you when you're driving it, when you're sitting in it.
Yeah. You have a Mercedes as well, I believe.
Yes, so we have a Mercedes G-Class SUV in this lovely, delicious dark blue.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Yeah, I know that's a really nice, comfy car. But when this was launched, I really loved it. A lot of the attention to detail in this car, you don't see it really now because it's daylight, but at night there's ambient lighting and you have 64 shades of it, and it's teeny tiny details just around the air vents and all, which is pretty new for us. And I think it is pretty interesting. AI, it pretty much reads things ahead of you, and it's one step ahead these days. And I'm sure you have it in your car as well. Hey Mercedes, how can I help? Can you turn the AC up?
I'm setting the temperature on the driver's side to minimum.
Are you like that when you get a storyline told to you? Is your mind already racing ahead with the script and the screenplay? And when someone's narrating a story to you, do you kind of already start picturing it before you even dive into the details?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school and I considered myself, a writer, I used to write stories and essays. It was a creative writing teacher that pointed out to me that my writing was more visual than it was, let's say, literary. And when somebody is, giving me a concept that they would like me to write, if I can start to visualize it, in fact, it's almost like if frames of the movie are going through in my head, then I'm like, yes, I can do this. I have it in the bag. So it's essential for me, yes.
And, your scripts have pretty much grabbed eyeballs, captured attention, pretty much like this car does, sporty and stylish. 10 years ago, you did a script, you did a story called Mahive, which was all about kind of body shaming and body imaging. And tell us a little bit about that and how that came, because that was your own story, I believe, and part of what you felt. So tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I was always like a plump child growing up, and in my teen years, I gained a lot of weight. So I was extremely overweight. And I found, especially when you reach that vulnerable age in your late teens, when you want to, be known, you want to be popular, you want, the opposite sex to admire you. And, I realized that because of the way I looked, people were judging me, not just judging my appearance, but also maybe my personality or my skill levels. So, it had a profound effect on my personality, and it may be a cliche that overweight people tend to develop a sense of humor, which is, sardonic, sarcastic, more on the dark side. It's true, it happened for me because, you do whatever you can to capture attention in the room and you become the funny person. And that ultimately, of course, helped me in my writing. It helped me become a better writer because of the sense of humor I developed. But of course, later when I lost weight, I realized that people, you don't realize it when you are overweight, but when I lost weight and I became healthy, I started to take fitness seriously. I realized that, I was the same person inside. My personality, my IQ level was the same, but people were perceiving me differently. I mean, in a way, I suppose humanity is a bit shallow, but it's to do with good design. You're drawn towards something with a better design, right? So this is something that I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about an overweight lead female protagonist and what kind of effect it has on your mental health because of the way people are projecting their own judgment of you on you and whether you should accept it or not and start to believe you are the person that they believe you to be. So it was cathartic for me in that sense.
Did it give you kind of a sense of freedom of, all the shackles that you'd kind of broken and or thought about always?
I think I'll always be the fat girl inside.
Yeah.
If somebody gives me a compliment, I'm always wary of them. I'm like, really? Are you sure? But yeah, it did help in a way that it was my therapy.
Yeah. And do you like writing like issue-based scripts that kind of bring out a subject or talk about, things?
I think for me, while telling a story, my characters are the most important, and I let them lead the story rather than enforcing the story or the narrative on my characters. So it's very important. We all know that, popular content shapes society in a way. It works both ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a chicken and egg scenario. What comes first? But I think it's balanced. It's society affects content and content affects society. They both have an influence on each other. So it's really, really important that we do have a certain amount of, social awareness when we are writing our scripts and our stories. So I always like to project something. And what I find is the more mainstream content that I'm writing, the more I want to bring the issues in because it's popular mainstream content that is getting to the maximum number of people. Like, for example, in former shots, talking about certain issues dealing with women, certain issues of feminism, certain issues of equality. It's really important to bring that out in mainstream content because it affects the women in your audience and it also affects the men watching it and, them being sensitized to the issues that women face.
Good you brought up 4 more shots because I was going to ask you about that next. Of late, I find that there's a lot more women-centric serials, movies. Originally it was all about the hero, but now they're heroine-based films, which are, sometimes just carried on the weight of a woman's shoulders, and serials as well. And for 4 more shots, you had an entirely female crew and, cast as well. Because it was a female-based cast, was it the reason they chose a female scriptwriter? Is that how it works?
Well, the creators of the show, Ishita and Rangita Nandi, wanted to have a predominantly female crew because they felt that women-centric stories have always been told from a male gaze.
Yeah.
And they wanted to tell this particular story from a female gaze. So that was the reason why they wanted female screenwriters, they wanted a female cinematographer, the female costume stylist, predominantly women telling the story of women by women for men and women.
That's amazing. That's something that I wonder. I mean, like you see all these action kind of films and all. Is there that kind of, process where they decide, oh, this is more a male thing, so probably a guy would write it better? Or is it, people now accepting it more that females can also probably write that kind of a script? Or
Well, when I first started working in Mumbai in the Hindi film industry as a screenwriter, there was the general feeling that women screenwriters write a certain kind of genre and male screenwriters are suited for a different kind of genre. And yes, there were a couple of times where somebody was looking for a screenwriter for a thriller, for an action film, and they decided that me being a woman would not be able to do justice to it. But it has changed. I mean, even women-centric content has changed when my director Rajshri Oja and I back in 2005 and 2006 started to pitch Aisha to production companies. We were told, oh, female-centric films don't work. The audience wants to see male-centric films, which is strange because world over, romantic comedies, I mean, we could call Aisha a chick flick, but even romantic comedies around the world are normally female-centric. The protagonist is always a female lead. But in India, romantic comedies made by mainstream studios have male lead protagonists made for a predominantly male audience. So it was difficult. And then finally, of course, because Sonam believed in the script, then, we got a producer for it. But now people are definitely, especially because of OTT platforms, because they are aware of the demographics, they want female-centric content because they have such a large female audience that's craving that kind of content,
Yeah. I guess, there is. And I think OTT has also changed the way people kind of view things and see things as well right now. You spoke earlier about design, and that's when I first got into this car. I think that's one of the first things that struck me because the interior was just so well designed. We first kind of saw this really nice, big, massive screen with its dual display and kind of grabbed your attention.
Beautiful.
Yeah, much like this big screen with its two 10.25-inch screens. You went a big screen as well. You did a movie with Abhay Deol in 2014. So tell us a little bit about that. How was that experience?
Well, it was very different from just being a writer to transition into directing. It was a dream that I had since film school. Also my undergrad, the idea was that one day I would be a director. And I fell into writing quite by accident. I was an assistant director. I wrote a script which I thought I would direct someday. A director read it and he said, oh, the script isn't so good, but you can write. Will you write with me? So that's how, I became a screenwriter. So when I got the opportunity to finally foray into directing, I grabbed the opportunity. But by then, it was 10 years since I'd been a screenwriter and I'd become, I suppose, what you may call too intrinsic to be a director. A director has to lead. I loved the designing aspect of it. I loved directing the actors. I loved directing the camera. But at the end of the day, an intrinsic personality cannot lead. An intrinsic personality is working all by herself. It's my own private project. So I realized that I had fallen so much in love with screenwriting. That's really where my heart lay. So it was one and done.
Do you dream of still directing your movie one day?
No, I dream now of writing my big epic Indian novel.
Okay.
Winning the Pulitzer or the Booker Prize.
Amazing.
Hey, one day.
We look forward to that. But, your life is, I think, reading up on it before I met you, is pretty much like the sunroof, open to everything. So you're doing script writing and somewhere along the way, there's a gin business that came along. How did that happen?
I think when you're doing something for so long, a certain amount of complacency sets in. And my husband, who's also in film and TV, Khalil, we had been doing this since university. And we were like, there has to be something more that we can do. Is this it? Is this all we're capable of? And because we were doing something, we were, lucky enough to do something that we were passionate about since university, which was film and TV. We were like, we need to find something else that we're passionate about. And I had become a gin drinker in 2008. I was visiting a friend in London, and I used to be a vodka drinker. And we went to a bar, and I ordered a vodka tonic, and she was like, no, you can't do that anymore. You have to order a gin and tonic, because otherwise I won't be seen with you.
Yeah.
And then this drink came, it was a gin and tonic, but it had a cucumber slice in it. And I was like, wow, I get my salad with my drink. That's amazing. And of course it was Hendrix, and that made me a gin drinker. And I converted Khalil into a gin drinker as well. So when we were thinking of doing something which we were passionate about, of course, he has his own passions, I have my own passions. So it was difficult to find a meeting ground as to what we could do to start a business together. And then, once we were in London in 2018 and it was raining, we were running out of St. Pancras, King's Cross, and we ran into the St. Pancras Hotel, and there was a bar there called Gilbert Scott, and there was a bartender who was making us all these gin cocktails, and we were talking about the ginaissance that was happening around the world, and he was like, so what's the gin scene like in India? And we were like, nothing. And that's when we turned to each other and we were like, this is what we should do, because we considered ourselves very passionate about gin. Yeah. We were gin connoisseurs. We would visit gin distilleries around the world. We would buy gins in our travels, Oh, there's this little known Portuguese gin, or, we go to Sri Lanka and the first thing we do is give us Colombo gin, So that's how gin came about. We had nothing to do with F&B. We had nothing to do with alcohol. But we decided to take the plunge, and here we are.
Was it tough to start that off? And there are a lot of challenges with an alcohol industry, I imagine, and especially coming from a background that you know nothing about it. So did you have to get special distillers? I don't even know what it entails. But
yes. So I thought that the difficult part about this business was going to be learning how to distill gin and setting up the distillery, what it entails to have in a distillery, to learn that, to go into the chemistry of it all, That was actually the easy part, because, we are fairly intelligent people, I think, my husband and I, and learning distilling was it took 6 to 8 months, and we really delved into it. We did courses. It was actually because we decided to start our own independent distillery in Goa, and not contract bottle. That's where, the hard part began, because it's dealing with a very controlled, regulated industry. So it requires, hundreds of licenses. And each license, of course, requires hundreds of forms and paperwork. So that for us was new, because even though there is a certain amount of government regulation in film and television, but that's more to do with censorship than anything else. It was the first time we were foraying into something which is so regulated. So it was difficult. And since then, of course, the amount of paperwork it requires for excise requirements and government regulations takes up a lot of our time, So we have a couple of dedicated people just to take care of, excise requirements. And it's also difficult coming, from outside an industry, especially, in our 40s, to be able to really make an impact. But, because we come from a storytelling background, because we come from an industry where we had already got a certain modicum of success. So, we could really push it without having any fear.
Yeah. How did you come up with the name?
So, when we were driving around Goa, trying to look for an industrial area that we would start our distillery in, because you have to have it in an industrial area, when we finally decided and picked, the sheds in Coal Valley Industrial Estate in North Goa, we discovered there were a lot of lotuses growing in the marshes around, the marshes and the swamps. And so I was like, we have to include lotus in our botanicals, right? In our gin botanicals. And then, I was looking for some words that would kind of signify lotus. And of course, because we're an Indian gin, I started looking for Sanskrit words that meant lotus. And I came upon this word, tamras, which meant not only lotus flower, but also copper, which fit completely into our gin because we copper distill.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, magic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really nice name. So I was wondering how you came up with it. Yeah. So pretty amazing journey, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit to the film part of it, because you spoke about censorship. And I often hear, engineers and designers in the car industry kind of battle it out with one another, because they also have to have that balancing act, right? And, what do you edit and what do you not edit? So does it kind of upset you, like when you've written something and it's really great and then it gets censored and pulled out of a script?
I think when it comes to language, I completely understand sometimes where they're coming from. Of course, you also don't want to watch anything which is full of, like abuses. But when they want to censor a particular dialogue because it projects a certain trait of a character, or they want to censor a particular storyline, then of course I'd like, why? Why can't I tell my story the way I want to? Of course, OTT has less restrictions in that sense.
Yeah. Do you kind of imagine these characters in your head as you build them up, and then, when they translate into actors or actresses that come and play that part, often there must be satisfaction, or do you sometimes feel like, this wasn't quite what I imagined?
So when I start writing a script, I don't want to imagine the actor. There are some writers that like to imagine the actors when they're writing the characters, but I like the characters to just exist in my imagination, And, by the time I finish the first draft, which I consider my baby, it's mine alone, which I'm writing in my study all by myself, then, there's a certain amount of give, that I have to. So it's like slowly giving up your baby. Your baby's growing up.
Yeah.
So, it's an infant when it's at the first draft level, and then by the time it gets to the casting, it's a rebellious teenager. So, but by then I've left that hold on it. So, by then I'm looking at the actor as the character, whoever's been cast.
So is there a kind of script that you always wanted to do but never managed to do, and you kind of dream of this is the kind of script I want to write?
I mean, it isn't a particular story in that sense, but there is a feel. I mean, I have not got an opportunity to really show my dark side yet. But I really want to write a dark psychological thriller where everything and everybody is dysfunctional. And just really messed up, and by the end of it, the viewer should be like, oh my god, what did I just watch?
Okay. So your life is pretty fast-paced, like this car is, but what does Devika need to unwind? I mean, you're writing already and reading already, so what do you do to kind of zone out a piece and unwind?
Well, one is to really go on long drives where I can space out and think of stories, and the smoother the car ride, the better, And another thing which I love to do, as everybody does, is binge watch. Of course, the ideal way to spend an evening with my husband and I is where, we indulge in a little bit of cocktail making, whether it's a good Negroni with a good, vermouth, or a martini, or something that we've concocted, and get each other to taste and just have a really nice conversation, whether it's, just us or a couple of good friends.
Yeah, I know. That's just kind of the best way to unwind is with good friends and a nice cocktail. Do you often watch, like you were saying, you binge watch, do you often watch other people's scripts and say, this could have been different. I could have done this a little bit differently, and
I don't feel that way. Sometimes I feel jealous of some content which I feel that I wish I could have been part of the team. But not that I would have done it differently, but I wish I could have been a part of this writing team, or I wish I could have written this show.
Script writing, gin making, what's next?
What's that? Well, I hope to retire in Goa someday.
That, I think, is on everybody's bucket list, to do that and just kick up and be by the beach and enjoy ourselves. But it's been fun chatting with you, Devika. Thanks so much for taking time out and being with us, and we hope to see a lot more of your screenplays, and our viewers as well will be watching out for that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for this extremely smooth ride.
So thank you.